Boker Tov, today's staff is staff testing קידושין as we learned fortunately for Elazar ben Ruma and Yosef ben Chaim Yichal. Tanur Banan, right halfway down the page at the two dots. Bishtar case that we already learned back on Daf Hay that back on Daf Beis we said that a woman could be acquired. That means the first step in קידושין, the first step of קידושין, Kesef Shtar Bia. And we discussed already back on Daf Dal and Daf Hay Kesef, how do you know Kicha Mistei Ephron, or from the Yatzav Haisa, rather from the Yatzachina Mein Kosef, those two psukim about money. Then we talk about shtar. How do we know shtar works? So it said back on Daf Hey, because it says the Yatzav Haisa, right? The Yatzav Haisa, we compare leaving, where she goes out with a get, Kosef Lesev Krisis, to Haisa, when she comes in, she can come in with the shtar also. And then we talked about Bia, but we're going to talk more about Bia soon on today's daf. But first, the Gemara says, how does it work with a shtar? We learned that a shtar works. You can kaddish with a shtar. You don't have to give her a ring or money or have Bia with her. You can give her just a document that's not worth anything. How does it work exactly? Tanur Rabbanan. Bishtar Kate said, how does it work? Kasavla on the writes on a piece of paper, al cheres, or on a piece of a shard, on a piece of earthenware. Even though it's not worth anything. The paper doesn't have to be worth anything. The bia is not worth anything. It's not monetary. Only kesef is monetary. This is not monetary. Shtar doesn't have to be worth anything. The paper could be worthless, less than a pruta. What does he write in there? We're talking here in a case where she's under the age of 12 and a half, so that her father still decides who she marries. He's the one who's giving her over. He writes, what does he write on the shtar? Bitcha mekudeshesli. Your daughter is betrothed to me. Bitcha moresesli. The same thing. She's engaged to me. Bitcha lin should be for my wife. Harezim mukudeshes. And he gives him the shtar. Gives the shtar to the father. The father's the one marrying her off, as we'll see. That's the key at this point. Okay, so he writes that in the shtar and he gives it to him. Obviously, we had before they were talking about קידושין already, right? You don't have to actually say it at that point. He writes it in the shtar. But they're talking about קידושין. You shouldn't tell them, this is a document, this is your title to a new car, and I'm giving it to you, and he fools them. So, why? Because you need their consent. Gittin, remember, Minat Torah, you don't need her consent. If you divorce a woman against her will, Minat Torah, that's okay. Minat Rabbanan, Bismanah, we don't do that. But Minat Torah, you can divorce her against her will, but you can't marry her against her will. She has to want to get married. Okay, so here also the father has to consent to giving her over. Maskal Rav Zeira bar Mamo, what do you mean? That's how you do it, where he writes on the shtar. This is not like a regular shtar of sales of a commercial document. Why? Who normally writes the document? You go into a store and you buy something. Who gives you the bill of sale? Who gives you the invoice? You give it to the seller, or the seller gives it to you? The seller writes out the shtar, right? The seller says, I'm selling you this item. Hasa mocher kosevla. Sadi mechurlach, my field, sadi mechurlach, my field is sold to you. Hacha bal kosev bitcha mekudeshes li. Here, who is being sold? The girl is being sold by her father effectively to the husband. Not the husband. The husband's the purchaser. So it's not the same as commercial. So why shouldn't you do the same way? In other words, just like by a commercial sale, the seller writes the document. Here too, the father should write the document. It depends. It's a different apples and oranges over here. When it comes to selling commercial issues, the pasuk indicates that it's the seller. Over here, when it comes to marriage, it's the buyer, the husband, who's acquiring the wife, who writes it. Pasuk say when it comes to selling, it says if a man is poor and he sells from his inherited land, and he sells it, but it depends on the seller. Here it says kiikach, which by the way is in this week's parsha. Kiikach, we're going to have several psukim today that are not only in this week's parsha, but when you're maver sedra, technically what you're supposed to do, shnai mikra vekar targum. Technically, it's not, you do it on Shabbos, the whole thing. You're supposed to do the first day Rishon, Sunday you do Rishon, Monday you do Sheni, Tuesday, today you do Shlishi. The psukim that we're going to have today are in Shlishi. Mamish today's Maver Sedra, today the way you're supposed to, today's parsha, literally the day of the week. says kiyikach there. It says kiyikach b'baltal rachmana. Man takes it depends on the husband, even though he is the purchaser. So selling, don't compare apples and oranges. That's commercial matters is one thing, right? Here it says kiyikach ishisha. Kiyikach, a man takes it. Kiyikach b'baltal depends on the husband. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? A hasanami, when it comes to commercial matters, hasanami says that pasuk in Yirmiyah talking about Yirmiyah bought from Hananel. Rashi says Yirmiyah Yakones Asadam Hananel says there hasanami ksiv sados bakesef yiknu. They should be acquired. I mean, it sounds like the purchaser is the one who makes the deal, who signs the document. Sados bakesef yiknu will be acquired, not to be sold. Mocher is to sell. Yiknu is to acquire. It's Kari Be Yaknu. You can read it as Yaknu. Sometimes because of Yaknu, meaning you will cause them to be acquired by the purchaser. So if that's how you're darshing the words, my time, of course, Be Yaknu. You want to make those two things jive, mocher selling and buying. Is it the buyer? Is it the seller? So you say it's the seller because it says mocher. That's clearly selling, and you'll change the lettering of the vowels of Yiknu to Yaknu. Or kiyukach. You could also call this also kiyukach. This is also in today's parsha, talking about where the parsha of Motzi Shema. Motzi Shema, if a man marries a woman, claims that she wasn't a virgin, because that she committed adultery during the time she was an arusa, she wasn't a virgin. So they go to court. And if it turns out that she indeed committed adultery and there's Adam, you kill her. But if not, the husband has to pay the father $100. And because it says over there, as BT, there the father is telling the court, as BT Nasatalisha said, I gave my daughter over to this man. So it sounds like, again, the seller is doing it. The father is the seller, as BT Nasatalisha said in this week's parsha, right? It says, it's BT Nasatalisha Pasik Tesvav and Perik Chaf Beis. And he hates her. So it sounds also, so here also you could read it as instead of kikach, read it as kiyakach or kiyukach. He was caused to take his wife by the seller, the father. So you could also switch around words. The truth is, it's a lachal moshe misina that's how you do things. When it comes to fields, it's the seller who writes the document. When it comes to marriage, it's the buyer, the husband. And they supported the views of the halacha mashmasina with psukim based on umocher mechuzaso or kiyikach. Even though you could say that you could change the words around also and say, well, look at this biti nasanti sounds like the father, the seller, should write the document in the case of the star. But we have halacha mashmasina. We base on hasanami as Sefer HaMakneh. You want to say that when it comes to selling, it says Soros Bakesef Yiknu, and therefore maybe the purchaser should write the document when he's buying a field. That same in the same parsha, it says Soros Bakesef Yirmiyah writes, and I took the Sefer of the Makneh, I took the book of the document of the Makneh, meaning the one who's causing it to be acquired, that would be the seller who's giving it over. Again, when it comes to any transfer of anything, it always depends on the das of the makneh, the person who's giving it over. You could make a kinyan on my car, on my house, on my shirt, anything. But if I don't want to sell it to you or give it to you, it's meaningless. Yamarava. So that's how the ksuba work. Not the ksuba. This is not the ksuba. This is the shtar קידושין that he writes this in the document and he gives it to the father if she's under the age of 12 and a half. Now he explains more, but I'm not.
Is that familiar with what's written in the star? Money?
There's no money. There's no money involved.
So then it's
No, he's actually he's buying her. He's writing in the star. I'm betrothing you with this document. That's it. There's no chalipin. There's no exchange of anything else. Chalipin is always
no exchange of anything.
Right. There's nothing. No exchange here. There's no chalipin. It's not chalipin. It's not anything.
Exchange is the document itself.
Yeah. But in an exchange, there's one item goes this way, the other item comes the other way. There's two items involved. Here, there's no item involved, unless you want to call the girl the item. the father accepting the document is all you need for the kinyan. No, that's not chalipin. Why? Chalipin is not worth anything. Chalipin doesn't have to be worth anything. No, but he's not giving her over any item. In other words, it's not like you buy a field. You could also say that. How do you buy? How do you make a chazak on a field? Kesef shtar chazak. If you show ownership, you lock up the field. So is that chalipin because you're doing something and you're getting the field? No, that's you're getting the girl, you're getting the field, but that's not chalipin. Chalipin is I give you something and you give me something. I give you my pen, you give the rabbi gives you his pen, and you give him your chametz. You're transferring two different things. Here it's not transferring, so to speak. It's a yes, he's giving over his daughter. You could say that he's acquiring the daughter, but it's not chalipin. It's not chalipin because there's no other item involved. Or you could just say that's how the Torah said it. That's not the case of chalipin. Yeah, you can always say that.
The same thing.
Well, in the case of the get, so what over there he's giving her herself. He's giving her the get, and he's giving her. There's no exchange. No, but I can understand Avram's point because Avram's saying he's giving him the shtar, and the father's giving him the daughter, so to speak. That's your chalipin, but that's
in this case. But if he gives it straight to the woman,
right. So she could also say he's giving her the shtar, and she's giving she's giving him herself. You could look at it that way, but it's not chalipin. That's how the Torah says. That's how you do קידושין. That's קידושין. It's not chalipin. Right? It's not done in that form. We said before that chalipin doesn't work. Why? Because chalipin. The reason why it doesn't work is not because there's some inherent thing. It's because we said before that the reason chalipin doesn't work by a woman, by a marriage, is because chalipin is not. It doesn't have to have any money to it, like you just said. It doesn't have any money. And a woman wouldn't give herself over for nothing, right? So over here, what is she giving her over herself for? If it's done, it's really only a shtar or a bia. What is she getting? She's getting she's not getting anything except in bia. But so when it comes to bia and shtar, there is no money transfer. But that's how the Torah says, based on these psukim, that keser shtar bia works require a woman. It's not chalipin, even though it looks a little bit like chalipin. Okay, so the Gemara now says, so let's say he writes in the shtar. Also, Oel Acheres writes on the nia, on the on a shard or anything. It doesn't have to be cloth. It doesn't have to be parchment. Even though it's not worth it. Your daughter is mekudeshes. Now he writes this on it. Now, like we had before, your daughter. He's speaking to the father. Now, let's say he gives it to the girl. That's also okay, midaito, as long as it has the father's consent. Up until the age of 12 and a half, even though she's bat mitzvah and she's a gedola from the age of 12, but up until the age of 12 and a half, we learned before that the father has the rights to marry her off. So the father has to consent, even though she's 12 years old. If she would be a yisoma, if she wouldn't have a father, she could marry herself off at 12 because she's bat mitzvah. Her da'asa means something. If she's 11, no, she's a ketana. That's not a marriage minatorah. Minatorah, she could get married by herself if she's 12, but if she has a father, the father has authority, has rights over her. So he can write it, he can give it either to the daughter or to the father. To the father, obviously, if he accepts it, he accepts it. To the daughter, it's only accepted if the father consents. That's if she's not 12 and a half yet. Let's say he writes to her, not to the father. He writes to her on paper or on earthenware. Let's say he gives it to her, he says, you're my wife, same thing. Whether he gave it to the father or her, if she's 12 and a half and she agrees to it, then even if he gave it to the father on her behalf, the father's accepting on her behalf, he could, if she assigns the father and says, yes, I agree to it, give it to my father, and she agrees to it, then it's okay. If she told, like Rashi says, if she told the father to accept it for her, that's fine. But if she's 12 and a half. So again, up until the age of 12 and a half, the father, it's up to the father. He has to consent. After the age of 12 and a half, she has to consent, no matter who you gave it to. Even if she agreed to it, she's 15 years old and she agreed to it, and she could say, give it to my father on my behalf. That's all okay. That's how you do it with a shtar. Here's an interesting one. What happens if you wrote shelo lishma? Right, a get we learned has to be written lishma, because of law lishma, right, to her. That's also with the mapike, right? Mapike cost of law. That's not. That's no. But you talked about yesterday. We'll see. Like Isha, it means her. Her husband. Ishallah. With ba, I'm not sure how that works, but it's also means her, right? It means the darshan something with the mapike. So we know by Gittin it has to be written lishma. If you wrote it for somebody, even if you wrote it had the same names, you had that 1,000,000 times Gemara and Gittin. If you had 2 Reubens and 2 Leahs in the same town, the exact same names, last names, everything, and the Sofer wrote it for Reuben number 1 to give it to Leah number 1, you can't change his mind, can't use it now for Reuben number 2, even though the document looks the same. It's got to be written lishma, it's got to be written for that purpose. What about a shtar erison? Does that have to be written lishma? Let's say wrote shelo lishma. What's the deal there? Now, Havayis is Makshim. We said Pasuk says v'yatzav v'haisa li'ish acher, right? That we're also going to have later on, not in it's in this parsha, right? V'yatzav v'haisa li'ish acher, right? Yeah, that's not in today's laning, not in Shlishi, but it's also in Kiseitze, right? Ki ikachi shishu bala v'ayam zasachar v'enal v'kamas v'avastava v'holcha v'haisa li'ish acher. So we make a hekesh, a juxtaposition between Gittin and Havaya and getting married. Now, Havaya is the Yitzias Makshin. Do we compare getting married to leaving the marriage? My Yitzia on Amid Beis now, my Yitzia being Lishma, just like when it comes to leaving the marriage, Gittin has to be Lishma, Af Havaya being Lishma. Same thing with getting married, has to be written Lishma. Oh, Dilma, Havaya is Ladada Makshin. What are you comparing getting married to getting divorced? Compare the different kinds of marriages. What are the different kinds of marriages that we just said? We said, okay, according to Rav Huni, you could have even chuppah, but the basic 3 are kesef, shtar, and bia. Well, can kesef ever be lishma? When it was coined at the mint, it wasn't lishma for this person. You're giving her this money, or the shava kesef for the ring wasn't made for this person. It could be, but usually it's not when it's coins. Oh, the kesef lo be lishma. That can't be lishma. The coin wasn't made for this woman. Afavaya, the shtar also lo be lishma. So that was the question that was raised. Basar boy, after he raised the question, he decided the question himself. Why? Because how do we know that a shtar works at all? By Gittin it says, because of let's say if a priest is from us. How do we know that shtar works? Kesef, we learned out kicha or from Yatzachina main kasef and the combination of the 2. Bia we discussed already. We're going to discuss it at length in a few minutes on this page. But shtar, how do we know that you can get engaged to a woman, betrothed woman with a shtar? Because this is v'yatzav so we compare Gittin to quiddushin. So the same thing, since that's the main place that we know shtar from, that it works, it's got to be like the get. And that's the main place, Rashi explains, that's the main place that we know that shtar works at all. Like you say, Abraham, maybe kesef, you're giving her something. Bia, you can say you're giving her some enough. Piece of paper that is not worth anything, what are you giving her? The Torah says, that it works. Why? Because v'yatzav. Okay, so just like Gittin has to be lishma, this also has to be lishma. Okay, fine. So we understand now that it has to be lishma like a get. But let's say we already explained that when it comes to marriage, it has to be with her consent or the father's consent if she's under the age of 12 and a half. What happens if you wrote it lishma for this person, but you didn't ask her yet? You didn't get their agreement when you wrote the document. I read kadeshiously in the document, you didn't ask them yet. You didn't get the father's consent or the girl's consent. What happens then? You wrote it lishma, but he didn't ask her yet. Rava Ravina Amr, as I said, is a good solution. Rav Sharvia Amr Enam it's not good. It's got to be written with her consent. Papa now explain both shitas. Amr Papa I'll explain my reasoning. I'll explain their reasoning. I'll explain my reasoning. Let me first start with them. I'll tell you their reasoning. They wrote, meaning the 2 rabbis, Rav and Ravina said it's a kedushin anyway, as long as it was lishma, even though it wasn't written, when it was written, you didn't have her consent. What's their reasoning? It says, we compare, again, the hekesh of getting married to getting divorced. When it comes to getting divorced, we've explained in Torah, you don't need her consent. He can write the get and say, here's your get. And she says, I didn't agree, too bad. I don't need your consent. So he compares the same thing, just like when a gittin works, lishma, but without the consent. You could say the same thing when a gittin's getting married. I don't need your consent to write it. I need you to get married. Yes, you need your consent. But when it comes to, if we're learning out that a shtar works for getting married just like getting divorced, you got to have the same qualities, right? Just like the gittin works lishma v'shlamidaita, the same thing. The getting married works lishma v'shlamidaita. That's why Rav and Ravina say that it's a good condition. But I'll tell you my reasoning. This is Rav Papa talking. Rav Papa and Rav Sharga. Rav Papa said that it doesn't work. I'll tell you my reasoning. Again, the Yatsa B'Haisa, you compare getting married to getting divorced. All you, it has to be lishma, but when it comes to it, you need the das of the makna. You need the consent of the person who's causing it to happen. What does makna mean? Causing her to be acquired. Who's causing her to be acquired in the case of the get? Her husband. Her husband's giving her own freedom. Her husband is causing her to be acquired to herself, that she's free to marry anybody else now. So Mayatzin being in das makna, Afavai also being in das makna. You need das of the makna. And in the case of getting married, who is the makna? In the case of getting divorced, it's the husband who's the makna. In the case of getting married, it's the girl, the kala, or her father who's causing her to be acquired. If they don't agree, the husband can't force her to get married. So you need their das also. So again, you're comparing it to gittin. How do you compare it to gittin? Do you compare it to gittin that you don't need the das of the girl, shalomidata, or do you say compare it to gittin that just like by gittin you need the das of the makna? You can't write it without the consent of the husband divorcing her. Woman can't show up one day and say, "Here, I'm giving you. I had divorce written out already. Just hand it to me. I'm giving it to you in hand." It doesn't work that way. It has to have the das of the person causing the other person to be acquired. In this case, in the case of getting, it's the husband. In the case of getting married, it's her or her family, her parents. That's why we say that it's Eina Mekudesha. So if you write a shtar, if you marry a girl with a shtar, we don't do it today because everybody wants a ring, but technically it could work. But it has to be written lishma, and it has to be written with her consent. She has to agree to it in advance. Meisvei. How do you say that? We said Papa said it's no good, but Rav and Ravina said it is good, even if it was written without her consent. Yes, she has to agree to the marriage, but it doesn't have to be written. The shtar, when it was written, has to be lishma for her, but it didn't have to be when he wrote it. It didn't have to have her consent at that time. Meisvei enkos and shtar erisim unasuin. You don't write shtare erisim unasuin, and we'll talk about what this means. Ella midash shnein. Rashi seems to have the gears. We're talking about shtar erisin. He takes out the word nasuin, but in any case, we're concentrating on erisin right now. And you don't write an ella midash shnein. You need the consent of both. My love shtar erisin nasuin nam. It doesn't mean shtar erisin literally. Shtar erisin. What is a shtar nasuin? It's not clear. The answer, we'll see what nasuin means, but he's concentrating on the erisin part. What it doesn't mean shtar erisin says has to be written to consent of both of them. So how can Rav and Ravina say it's mukudeshes even if it was written without her consent? Says, lo, we're not talking about really the shtar of eris and a shtar of betrothing the girl. Lo, shtar psikta. We're talking about tanoim. You know, they write tanoim. Some people write it before the before the eris, and some people write after eris, and some people don't write tanoim at all. It's called shtar psikta, documents of stipulation. What do we mean by that? Rav Gidol Marav, like Rav Gidol Marav, kamatanose. Now they make a deal. Of course, a husband has to give her something, he has to write a ksuba and guarantee her the $200, etc., and he can add on to it. But there's also deals that the parents make. It's well known. Kamatanoisen, as we say in Yiddish, vifel gista. How much are you giving for the dowry? Lebimcha, how much are you giving for your son? Kach v'kach. That's how much I'm giving. Lebitcha kach v'kach. How much are you giving for your daughter? So much. Amdu v'kachu. Based on that agreement, they each agree to give X amount of money. Amdu. They got up a kachu. They made the קידושין. Kanu, Kanu, they acquired. This is a Karbmir. Today they write Tanoim, but you don't have to write Tanoim. They might not want to do it with a shtar because it's more complicated. There's more significant obligations if it was written in a shtar. But sometimes they just agree to it verbally. They say, okay, how much are you going to give? $1,000. I'm going to give $10,000. They both agree, and that's it. And they make קידושין based on that. That's done. That's a Ramnikin even though there was no specific kinyan, but they made the קידושין based on that agreement. That's good enough. So that's what we mean by ein kos min shtar erisim. If you do write it, you only write it if they both agree, because they're making a financial deal. When the kids get married, how much are each going to give, etc., etc. But the shtar erisim, according to Rava and Ravina, doesn't have to be written with her consent. Here, when it comes to the Torah, it has to be written with both of their consent. When it comes to Shtar Erev, as long as it's written Lishma, it doesn't really consent. However, seems to be we paskin like Rav Papa and Rav Sharvit that it has to be written both with both Lishma for them, and when it's written, it has to have a consent already in advance before you write it. So the next Gemara goes on. We're 5 lines into the wide lines on Amid Beis now. Ubabiyah. So we said Kesef Shtar Biyah. So we already explained back on Daf Hey. We already explained Biyah. What is it based on? So Rebbe over there said, how do you know that it works with Biyah? Was it on Daf Hey or on Daf Dalet Amid Beis? Uba'olam Malamishik is Biyah. Pasuk says, Hikach Isha Uba'olah, right? Right, yeah, but the mafik hey, that's not in today. That's in Tisei in this week's parsha, but not in today's parsha, not in today's actually. But it's right. It says uba Allah. Now Minalan. So how do we know it works with bia? So really, I had the Gemara back on Dalet that Rabbi already said there ubia, but here the Gemara Rabbi Yochanan gives a different answer. Minalan, Rabbi Yochanan Damakra. This is in today's parsha in Shlishi Damakra beulas baal. Here the pasuk says. She had bia with her husband, a woman who should be able to, they're both going to be killed. In other words, a married woman. Okay, if you sleep with a married woman, you commit adultery, you're both going to be killed. That's what the pasuk says. Ba'ulas baal. The husband's made the husband through bila. That's what Rabbi Yochanan says. So we had the pasuk before that Rebbe quoted of Uba Allah, right? Uba Allah. Here, Rabbi Yochanan is quoting a different pasuk. It says ki again the lashon is ki matzei ish shochim misha bu'ulas baal. Bu'ulas baal. What was a bu'ulas baal? She had bia with her husband. That shows you that he became her husband through bia. Amalei say Rabbi Rabbi Yochanan, why do you have this pasuk? Is it so like disgusting? Like what's wrong with Rebbe's pasuk? It's this uba Allah. We have back a dollar on the days. Rebbe learned that out. How do you know that bia works? It says uba Allah, right? Kikach ish isha uba Allah, and he has bia with her. That's how you know that bia works. Why are you learning out from Bulas Baal? What's wrong with this pasuk? So Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. He says, listen carefully. Rabbi says, if based on that pasuk that's Kikach ish isha uba Allah. So he says that's two things. First he buys her. Kikach, we learn Kikach. First you have to buy her with money, and then be a You know what you need to get married over there? You know what you need to be betrothed her? You have to give her money and have bia with her. When we said the Mishnah Kesef Shtar Bia means any one of the three work alone to make the קידושין work. So if be best in that pasuk, I would say Kikach ish isha. He has to give her money and bia, then they're betrothed. How do I know that bia alone works? That's from Beulas Baal. But based on his pasuk, Rebbe's pasuk, no, that wouldn't work. Because from there, I might think you'd have to give her money, Kikach ish isha, and have bia with her in order for it to betroth her. How could you say something like that? Im Cain, wait a minute. If that's the case, listen carefully. If that would be the case, that based on that pasuk, you would say that in order to betroth the woman, you both have to give her money and you have to have bia with her. If that's the case, Im Cain, the Torah says again in this parsha that if a man sleeps with a nara ma'orasa, a basula, right? The pasuk says, Kiya nara basula ma'orasalish. If you have a virgin girl who's engaged to a man, wait a minute, how can you have a virgin girl engaged to a man? If you say, Rabbi Yochanan, that the pasuk Kikach ish isha ubala would indicate that you have to, in order to get betrothed her, you have to give her money and have bia with her, so she's not a psula anymore, right? She's not a psula. How could she be? In order to be engaged, she has to already have bia based on that pasuk. If he was makdisher and then he had bia with her, so bu'ulahi. If he gave her the money and then so she's a bu'ul, she's not a psula. If he gave her the money, kikachish, right? Kicha, or yatzachina mein kasef, and he didn't have bia with her, so lav klumu. Because based on that pasuk, you're saying that the pasuk tells me she's not betrothed with money; she's betrothed with a combination of money and bia. So how could you ever have a man sleeping with a virgin engaged girl? She's not engaged until she's no longer a virgin. And if he didn't have bia with her, if she's still a virgin, she's not engaged. So what? How could the pasuk ever say if you slept with a woman, nara basula, if you have a virgin girl who's engaged? You can't have a virgin girl who's engaged because if she's not a virgin anymore, right? Because he had bia with her, she's not a virgin. Said gibsula. And if you didn't have bia with her, she's still a virgin. She's not engaged, right? Amru Rabbanan kamei dabaya. So the rabbis explained in front of Abaya. I'll give you the answer. It is possible. He had bia with her. The husband had bia with her. Shalokadarka, like anal sex, unnatural sex. Shalokadarka. That's what he had. So she's still a psula. That's what they wanted to give an answer. That's how it could work. He had bia with her. We're talking about in theory how it could work. We're definitely saying if it would be based on pasuk bia, I say bulas bala. Yes, bia alone works. Based on bulas bala. If I would only have the pasuk bala, I would say you have to have both. So how could you have both and she's still a virgin? He had bia shlokadaka. Amalei Abaya. That's not a good answer. I'd completely Rebbe and Rabban are going to disagree in a few minutes. We'll see that. Rather, somebody else. If somebody else had bia with this woman, Shalokadarka, does that make her not a virgin or not? There's a machlokus we're going to see in a minute. But if somebody else did it, Bula sma means any kind of bia. Pasuk says in Vayikra Mishkevei Isha, anyway you have bia, whether it's naturally bia kadarka, bia shalokadarka. So everybody agrees that a husband makes her into a bu'ula. So you can't say, again, if the husband had bia with her, even with shalokadarka, and technically her hymen hasn't been broken, she still has her virginity, she's still considered a bu'ula already, and she wouldn't be a psula. Everybody, as we'll see, Gemara is going to explain that in a few minutes, that the husband makes her a bu'ula, whether it be a shidaka. Like Mahi, where do you see this machlokas, Rebbe and the Rabbanan? You say, when the machlokas, Rebbe and Rabbanan is if somebody else had be a shalokadarka with her. What are we speaking about? The Tanya, a brisa brought down in Sanhedrin. Let's say this girl was betrothed to a man, right? She was an engaged girl. She had a fiance. And now 10 men slept with her. 10 other men, not her, slept with her. By Dayanim, so she's still a psul. They all had bia with her shalokadarka, right? Call it a gang rape today, but it doesn't have to be rape. It could be even if she wasn't raped. She might have agreed to it. They all get skila. Why? Because she's still nara morasa basula. And the rule is that a nara morasa basula, she's engaged at skila. If you have adultery with an engaged girl, the punishment is skila. If she's a married woman, adultery with a married woman, the punishment is chenek. That's what the Gzeres HaKosav is. So he says they all get skila over here because she's there in all case. All of them can had bia with a virgin girl. The Tanya Bo'aleh Yudanashim, if she's engaged and virgin, Vadayim Sulkum Baskila. Rebbe says no. Omer and I say Harishim Baskila. The first one gets skila, right? All the bia with Shlokadar. The first one's skila because he had bia with a virgin betrothed girl. But Kul Mechanik, the other 9 get chenek because she's no longer a virgin. So here there's a machlokas where Rebbe says that if somebody else had deal with her shlokadarka, the first guy turned her from a virgin into a non-virgin, right? Even though her virginity technically, medically, physically is still there, but halachically she's not a virgin anymore. Rebbe says the first one is Baskila, because when he had deal with her, is the first one she had deal with. That's Baskila because she was a virgin. The other 9 are Bechenek. So there's a machlokes when other people slept with her, Shalokadarka, did they transfer her from being a virgin to a non-virgin, halachically or not? The Rabbanan say, no, she's still a virgin. And Rebbe says, no. Acher, the first guy does make her from a virgin into a non-virgin. So there we see, there's a machlokas whether an outsider can turn by a bish lokadak, can he make her into a non-virgin or not? But as far as the husband goes, the husband certainly turns into a non-virgin. So we're still back to this problem. If you say that if you have a havmina to say that you would need, based on the pasuk kikachishi shubala, that you need both a ring, so to speak, a ring, kesef, and bia, how could you ever have kia nara basula ma'ora salish? How could you ever have a skila in that case? How could you have that whole parsha? If she's engaged, she's not a virgin anymore because you need bia for that. And if you didn't have bia, she's not engaged. It's very simple. How do we start off today? You got engaged with a star. With a star, you don't need bia. Here we're talking about based on the pasuk. Rabbi Yochanan saying, if I don't have that pasuk, I would think you need both a ring, money, and bia, but not star. Star doesn't need that. So you could have kinara basula based on how do you get kinara basula? How could you have a nara basula morsel if you have bia? So you got to engage with a star. Hol b'gomer, since it completes the marriage. Hol b'gomer motzi, since how do we know star works? Based on gittin of yatzav haisa, just like it completes the divorce. Gomer machnas, it also can complete the marriage without bia. Okay, so that's how Rabbi Yochanan says. So Rabbi Yochanan says, how do you know bia works? Bulas baal. He doesn't like the pasuk of Rabbi. Why? Because kiikach ish isha ubala might indicate you need both kesef and bia. I don't know. I know bia alone works. That's from bulas baal. Rabbi Yochanan hayu bala mayaflek. So what does he do with Rabbi's pasuk? What does he say with the word pasuk? Or tell you uba Allah again. Mapik uba Allah. And if you take a woman uba Allah and you have bia with her works to complete them, to make a betrothal, to make the first step in marriage. Only this one, they ain't amavriya, but amavriya, when a man buys a young Jewish girl under the age of bat mitzvah from her father to be a slave girl for him, right? Which is similar to a Eved Kanani, except it's a girl over here. And most of the rules we're going to talk about that in the next few letter about Eved Ivri and Amavriya. If he buys her, I might think he can acquire with bia. Only you take a woman for a wife, then you can acquire with bia. But if you take her for an Amavriya, for a slave, even though later on it's a good thing to marry her, but if you're taking for a slave, you can't acquire with bia. That's Ubala. Teach me Dafka. This one. Again, Rabbi Yochanan says, how do I know that bia works to make a marriage? What does Ubala teach me? Only a woman you can acquire with bia, but not Amavriya. I might think Kal v'chomer from Yavama, my Yavama. Nikas b'kesef Yom is not acquired with kesef minator. Nikas bia, that's how you acquire with bia. Zu shenikas b'kesef, this amavriya which you acquire with money and a din shenik. I may think it also bia. But we must know, Mali Yavama she can't speak with medicine. Yom is different. You know why bia alone works there? Because she's already attached. There's already a zika from the first husband, from Reuven, who died with no children. So she can't speak with medicine. She's already attached. So there, baby, so the answer is so maybe you even shouldn't work. I said, you're right. You can't learn it based on the Kavacham from Yavama. But I might think that bia should work to acquire an Amavriya based on this. It says over there, you take an Amavriya. It says, if you take another wife, besides having the Amavriya, you take another wife, right? Right? The Amavriya is juxtaposed as compared to another wife. Ma'acheres can be just like the acheres, the other wife can acquire with bia, as we've explained already, according to everybody who works with bia. Af Amavriya mikdami. I might think so. Kamashwan, not. In other words, you might think that Amavriya should also be acquired, just like she's acquired with money. She can be acquired with bia also. Kamashwan, no. Only a wife. You take somebody as a wife, betrothed as a wife, that can be acquired with bia, not an Amavriya. Okay, for Rebbe Heiss Farmanoli. So Rebbe learns Ubal teaches me that bia works. How does he know this idea? That what? That only a woman could be acquired with bia, not an Amavriya. Imkin lech rachmana ubal. Let it just say tikachisha ubal. And he has bia. My uba Allah, what's her? The hay with the mapik hay, right? My uba Allah and have bia with her. Shma mina taiti. That's to teach me uba Allah her. Her you can acquire with bia, not an Amavriya. Ula Rava the Amar. Rava says that Barahina Asberli. Barahina was a chacham, a Talmud chacham. Explained to me that the word kiikach ish isha uba'ala teaches me a different drasha. It teaches me קידושין המסורים לביה have קידושין, קידושין המסורים לביה have קידושין. I'll give you an example. A man goes over to a woman, to another man, and says, "I know you have two nice young girls there. They're both 10 years old. You got two twins. I'm giving you kesef קידושין. I'm giving you money, right? Money or a star, and I want one of them to be married to me. One of them's married to me. Didn't specify which one. The father didn't specify. He didn't specify. Now he's got a problem. Can he marry either one? You can't marry both of them because you can't marry two sisters, right? And you don't know which one he married. So you can't have bia with either one. Why? Because maybe it's a chosishto. Maybe he's married to A, so he can't have bia with B. Maybe he's married to B, can't have bia with A. So that's what we call קידושין, which is not Masur the bia. It can never be consummated. The marriage can never be consummated. So he says that's not a קידושין. That's not a קידושין. It's not that it's a קידושין. You don't know which one. It doesn't work because isha ubala קידושין. So קידושין which could be consummated as a קידושין. קידושין which cannot be consummated because it's impossible. You don't know which one's your wife, and which one's your sister-in-law. If a man has, let's say, an example, let's say a man has two adopted daughters. They're not related really. Each one is in different families. And you're not sure. So there you could take both of them. Have beer with one of them's your wife, one of them's not wife. So have beer with both of them and have two wives. They're not really related. But over here, if they're really two sisters, you can't marry either one. So if you can't be consummated, it's not a קידושין. That's based on this pasuk. So according to Rav, who says, Barahina, explain to me, the pasuk, it has to be קידושין which is capable of being consummated, capable of being קידושין. So what is he going to do? How is he going to learn Rebbe's drush? Rebbe says, Ubala teaches me, number one, that Bia works. Number two, that Amavriya is excluded. Ubala. How is he going to learn this drasha? If it would only be to teach me the first two ideas, that Bia works and it doesn't work for an Amavriya, say Obala, if he marries her with Kesef, with Bia, and Bia only works for her, not for Amavriya. My Ubala, what's the addition of Ubala? Shmamina, Kulis. You see all things, because Ubala teaches me it's got to be a קידושין which could be followed up with Bia. That's Barahina's Svara. Rabbi Haibulas Balme'avali. So now we explain what Rabbi Yochanan does with Ubala, right? To teach me to exclude Amavriya, and Rabbi also agrees with that. And the Svar of Barahina. What does Rebbe do with the pasuk of Rabbi Yochanan? Rebbe back on Daf Dalet said, "Ubala teaching me Bia works." What does he do with Bulas Baal? That That's the idea that Bulas Baal, if she had any Bia with her husband, even a Bia Shlokadarka, the Baal, for as far as it makes her into a husband, but she's not. That doesn't make a non-husband. If a non-husband cannot transfer from being a virgin to non-virgin based on Bia Shlokadarka. So again, if the husband is betrothed to her and sleeps with the Shlokadarka, so now she's not considered a virgin anymore. But somebody else cannot turn her into a non-virgin based on that kind of Bia. So it's more Miyasoli Rabbi Isfar. What do you mean? Does Rabbi hold that? Rabbi said in the case for the 10 guys, the first guy does turn her into a non-virgin, right? The first guy gets killed, the other 9 get chenek. Rabbi is like Svar, but Tanya Bola Yeranash, in the case we just mentioned before, 10 people slept with this woman who was betrothed. By Daini Psula, she's still technically, physically, she's a virgin. Kulam Baskil, they all get skilled. Rabbi Omer and I say, Harishim Baskil of Kulam Mechanik. That means that the first guy turns her into a non-virgin. That's why the other guys get chenek. So how can you say that the non-husband, his Bia Shlokadarka does transfer her, it turns her into a non-virgin? Rebbe's moda that when it comes to knas, when do you pay knas? If you rape a girl, it's also in this week's parsha. If you rape a girl who's not married, rape a girl who's married, who's betrothed, you get killed. If you rape a girl who's not married, you have to give the father $50 and you have to marry her and you can't divorce her. They all pay knas. You only pay knas for a virgin, right? If you even Rebbe's moda that she's still considered a virgin in terms of if 10 guys slept with her and she wasn't engaged, she wasn't married, that they'd have to pay knas. So Maishno told us, so why is only the first guy gets skila and not the other ones? If she's still a virgin, you're saying she's still a virgin really for the other 9 too. There, it's really the basic pasuk is talking about what? That if he raped her, if he raped a betrothed girl, right? He raped her, so it's not her fault. She's not going to get killed, right? Because it says over there, Ulanara lo sasadava. That's how we know in general. We're going to have that in the Zikin mitzvah, sasadava. That what? That ones rachmana patre. That's the lashon of the Gemara, right? That if somebody was something against their will, right? They were forced. That's not their fault. So we know that from Nara Sasadava. Why does it have to say Mesa Isha Sheshacham Levado? You already said Nara Sasadava teaches me Mesa Isha Sheshacham Levado. When it comes to killing the person with a skila, that's only one. That's based on that pasuk Levado. Kroyaseru. We already know such to say based on that pasuk. So technically, Rebbe is saying like the Rabbanan that she's really a virgin throughout. If she never had Bia Kedarka, and she, meaning she never lost her virginity, she's technically still a virgin for all 10. And halachically, she's also a virgin for all 10. So it's a knas, except when it comes to murder, when it comes to capital punishment on the man, only based on the pasuk. Again, that pasuk is speaking about when he raped her, but we're applying it even if he didn't rape her, even if 10 guys slept and she agreed with him, and she agreed to have bishlock dark with all of them, that only the first guy gets skila. Rabbanan, high levada mevle. What do the Rabbanan do with levado? According to Rabbanan, right? What do they do with levado? The Rabbanan say that they all get skila. They all get skila. Kuma skila. All 10 guys get skila because they all slept with a virgin betrothed woman. So what do they do with levado? I have like for a different verse, like a tiny basic am shneim, I choose shneim shabim. Rashi learns that. Rashi learns that when you let's say when you kill a rapist, right, for a girl, it's only if he had bia with somebody who was also capable of being punished, meaning she also had to be bat mitzvah. Let's say the girl was 6 years old and she was a betrothed virgin. So according to this idea, the rapist would not get skila because the girl that he slept with is not capable of being punished, even though she did it. She was raped, but if she did it willingly, she wouldn't be punished because she's only 6 years old. So yes, they both have the sense b'nei onshel. Says Rashi, excluding an adult man who raped who slept with a 6-year-old girl, who even if she did it willingly, she wouldn't. The husband, the adult man would not be punished because they're both not equal. Divir of Oshia or Rav Yoshia. Rav Yonasan Mesa Isha Shechavado. Mesa Shechavado teaches me no. Even if only the 20-year-old man slept with a 6-year-old girl, even though she's not capable of being punished, even if she did it willingly, still the husband, let's say they both did it willingly, or she's willingly, she doesn't really have das, but in this case, he could be killed even though she doesn't have a halacha of that at all. That's what the Rabbanan uses. How does Rabbi Yochanan uses bu'ulas baal to teach me that bia works? Right, that bia works in Mekadosh Isha. That's how we started off this memra. How do we know that bia works? Rabbi Yochanan said bu'ulas baal. So how does he know this halacha of what? That a husband makes her makes her lose her virginity, even if it was shelo kedarka, even if physically she's still a virgin, but bia shelo kedarka turns her into a non-virgin. Rabbi Yochanan is formula imkein nefkel kropulas ish. My bulas baal shema metarti. You could just say bulas ish. Right? Pasuk could say the pasuk is ki matzi shachavisha bulas baal. It could say ki bulas ish that a man slept with her, even shlo kedarka, would also turn her into a non-virgin. But it says bulas baal. Teach me only the husband turns her into a non-virgin via shlo kedarka and no one else. That's what Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan agrees with the halacha that only a husband turns her into a non-virgin. But he bases on the fact that it said bulas baal and not bulas ish. And Rebbe says that bulas baal alone, even if you don't have to. It's basically they're both learning out of bulas baal. But Rabbi Yochanan, even though he says bulas baal teaches me that bia works to Kaddish and Isha, he knows this svara that only a husband can turn her into a non-virgin via bila shel kedarka, because it says bulas baal and not bulas isha. But really both of them are from the same words. All right, we'll pick them here tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem, Tommy Boyle. Right. Yeah.